So speaking of reform, constitutional reform is something that it's something that I'm passionate about, and wanting to see sort of structural change within the system.
Yeah.
The Australian Progressives have said that they're committed to a referendum to S44 of the Constitution in order to bring it in line with modern multicultural Australia, and that it supports a complete redraft of the Constitution to capture contemporary thinking, practice, and the will of the Australian people. So for me, that's an immediate tick, because the fact that we are quite complacent in looking at how can we improve it, how can we revise it, it just seems to not really be on the agenda. Certainly I've never seen it on the agenda of the major parties. It's a too hot to touch, but this is the benefit of the minors in this regard. So talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, why that is important for the Progressives to actually look at how we can improve our Constitution.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Constitution and the Federation, came about over 120 years ago. It is, our federation is a direct result of a bunch of colonies getting together and saying, let's form a country. In that time, we have evolved and developed into a modern nation, and having a governance structure which was formulated over that long ago.
Yeah.
It leads to poor outcomes. We've got, I don't think our founders, looked that far ahead and saw what kind of country we would become.
I think they could have imagined it. To be honest.
Absolutely. So, if I wax philosophical for a moment, when you read things like Jared Diamond, who's the famous historian who wrote Guns, Germs and Steel, but he also wrote a book called Collapse, and he looked at the collapse of civilizations throughout history. One of the key, there's a number of key things that happen, like mass migration of people, climate change being a big one. One of the big key ones was inflexibility in governance structures.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a flexible governance structure, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, then it creates a circumstance where your society starts to crumble as trust fades and all the rest of it. So I think that we're right on the precipice at the moment. We're about to go into a decline. If we don't adapt to how we govern our country, then with climate change looming large along with it, if we don't adapt to change, then we're going to fail. So I think this is a pretty critical area of reform. How we govern ourselves. I like the idea of, this is my personal idea, more regionalised governments. So if it were up to me, I would abolish the states, get rid of them. It would be a regional level governance structure. So, metropolitan cities like Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, etc., they would have their own sort of regional structure. Then you'd have places like Albury Wodonga, Gold Coast Tweed, Canberra Queanbeyan, who sit on a border but function as one city, but have this invisible line in the ground which it makes taxes all messed up. Our administration is two different sets of administration. There's all manner of inefficiencies going on all across the country. This is, I think, a pretty critical thing. It's a massive job, no doubt, but I think it needs to be done. Otherwise, we're up for trouble.